What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So in front of me, I have two probably of the most full-featured field radios that you can get. I'm just going to come out right out in front and say neither one of these is actually a field radio. They're portable radios. I'm not taking any of these way out in the woods. I mean, you could carry either one of these, wherever, but there are radios that are better suited for that particular use case than these two radios. But I think for the right person or the right type of operator, these two radios share a very compelling feature set. And I apologize if that wasn't in focus. I just realized that might not have been in focus, and I just focused it up. So hopefully it's not all blurry now. You can tell that I'm not a professional at this. So in front of me on the left, we have the ubiquitous Icom IC-705, which is a fantastic radio. It's been around for a while. Awesome feature set. Hard to argue with the capabilities. On the right, we have the new Yaesu FTX-1 in the field form at the moment. And I want to talk I've only had the FTX-1 for a day, but I just want to talk a little bit about some of my thoughts on these two radios, who I think each radio might be for, who I think each radio might not be for, which one I'm going to keep and which one I'm not, and why. In a perfect world, I'd probably keep them both, and I could keep them both, but I'm not going to, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. But let's talk about some of the similarities and some of the differences, and I'm going to do some things with the FTX-1 that people have been asking about. Like, I'm going to measure actual current draw, because you're going to see that Yaesu says the current draw is one thing. I've found that in real life, the current draw is something totally different. So especially on receive. So I'll pull a battery off of this and I will power it from a 3 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery, and I'll put an amp clamp around the battery cable and we'll measure current draw and you'll see what it's actually like. And I'll do it on both radios so you can see the difference between the two. Spoiler alert, the Yaesu does draw more current, but it's not as high as Yaesu said it was. So similarities, they're obviously both, software-defined radios with waterfalls, and they have excellent audio. Although the audio is quite different between the two radios, I'll touch on that in a little bit. And some people may prefer one over the other. They both have built-in batteries. In the case of the Icom, it uses HT batteries. In the case of the FTX-1, it uses its own battery pack. You'll see that in a minute. As far as size is concerned, they are very, very similarly sized. So I shot a short last night when I first got this radio showing you the difference between the two. Let me raise this camera up a little bit. I apologize if this is bouncing around on you a little bit, but I want to get up high so you can see this. All right, so here are the two radios side by side. And you will see that the FTX-1 is, I don't know, maybe half an inch longer. It is just barely higher. And when I say barely higher, it's not even a quarter of an inch higher. It's maybe, I don't know. Well, let me lower the camera down and you can take a look for yourself. All right, it is negligible, the difference in height. All right. As far as the thickness is concerned, they're almost identical. So these two radios, from a thickness perspective, I'll pick you back up again. Sorry if you're getting dizzy. It's not my intention, although it is kind of funny. They are darn near identical when it comes to thickness. The edge going to the FTX-1 ever so slightly. It's ever so slightly narrower this way. It's ever so slightly taller. And like I said, it's about a half an inch wider. That doesn't tell the whole story, though. There is one more metric that we need to be concerned with, and that is weight. And this is one place where the 705 is going to win. So I have my specialty radio scale here. This is a high-tech radio scale. It can't be used for anything else. As you can clearly see, you would never use this for measuring any other object other than a radio. I don't know if you'll be able to see the the screen there or not. Let me zero it out. So I currently got it on grams because I'm not a troglodyte, so I'm going to do this in grams. If you want it in ounces, there are 28 grams in an ounce. So let's go with the lightweight first. I can't believe I'm saying this is the lightweight, but this weighs 1,187 grams, and I have the big battery in it. All right, I don't have the smaller battery in it, and obviously I took the cage and everything off this radio to make it a fair fight. This is the smaller battery. So with the bigger battery, which is a little more comparable, it's 1,186 grams. Okay. Now let me real quick on battery life before I forget. I could get about an hour, hour and a half maybe out of this smaller battery, maybe about 2 hours, 2.5 hours out of the bigger battery. Yaesu says you're going to get, I forget what they said, 6 or 9 hours out of the big battery in this radio. So keep that in mind. It's a much higher capacity battery, but we're at 1,186 grams on the Icom. Here comes the chonker. 1,638, so 500 grams heavier, or give or take. Right, that's a lot. It is substantially heavier. Like I said, for me, I don't think it matters that much. This is not a radio I'm putting in my backpack and carrying up a mountain for soda. All right, if I want a full feature all mode radio for soda, it's probably going to be a KX2, maybe a TX-500. It's not going to be either one of these. I don't think that's the use case for these radios. People do it, and that's fine. Just for me, that's probably not where I would use these radios, so I'm not super concerned about the weight. All right? I'm not going to be throwing this in a pack and carrying 8 miles up a mountain, or this for that matter. It's just, there are better options, okay? So that kind of gets the size and weight comparisons out of the way. Let's talk about feature set for a minute, because these two radios do have some different features from each other. So the 705 has internal Bluetooth, internal GPS, D-Star. It does 160 through 6, and then it does 2 meters and 70 centimeters. It's got an internal speaker, which is very, very good. Like I said, it takes HT batteries. Color waterfall. We'll turn it on. Well, I don't have it on waterfall currently. I have it on the meter screen. Everybody's seen this before. This is not anything new. Everybody's seen a 705 before. Very legible. Menu structure is simple, fairly intuitive. It's a great radio overall. It's hard to argue with this package. This is a fantastic radio for someone who wants to do drive up or short walk-in parks on the air, or a close-in summit where you can park close to the summit and then walk the rest of the way, and this is fine. Or any other sort of portable operations where you're not going to be hiking it around a long distance. Both of these are, I'm not going to say they're fragile. They're very, very substantial radios, but they do have touch screens and knobs sticking off the front and everything. Like I said, they're not designed for like the hardcore soda person. The FTX-1, sorry about the glare. In fact, let me kill my overhead light so we're not getting that glare on the screen. So the FTX-1, right off the bat, you're going to see something different. This is dual receive, and it is true dual receive. This radio has 2 antenna ports on the back. All right, one is for UHF, one's for UHF and VHF, and the other is for HF. Earlier today, I was listening to my local repeater on one receiver, and I was working 20 meters CW on the other. And I was listening to the repeater conversation while I was doing CW. That's cool. You can't do that on the 705. All right. The screen is much crisper and brighter on the Yaesu than it is on the 705. I will say that the waterfall is better on the 705. That's common with the Icom versus Yaesu stuff, although I'm so used to Yaesu's waterfalls now that I really don't care. I've been using a DX10 as my primary shack radio for so long that I'm used to it. The front layout, you've got your menu buttons down here on the bottom, some function buttons on the side. The Yaesu is a little bit different. I'm going to turn the overhead light back on so we can see again. Actually, what if I open this window? Again, you can tell I'm a professional at this because, I'm running around my room, turning the lights on, opening windows, all that kind of nonsense. That's better. You can see we've got a touch screen. We've got some knobs. We have a few buttons. And then we have some more buttons on the top of the radio. And I'm not sure one layout is better than the other. They're both fairly intuitive. I wouldn't say one is head and shoulders above the other. I think for some people, the Icom might be a little better, and for others, the Yaesu might be a little better. It just depends on your personal preference. The touchscreens are both very responsive. The menu structures, you saw the menu in the Icom before. You know, if we want to go into our deeper menus, we can go into our deeper menus and look at different things. If you want to set your connections or your time or any of your functions or all those things are in here, right? The Yaesu, in very typical Yaesu fashion, you hit the function button. It shows you what your current setting is. If I long press it, right, this takes me into my settings. So page 1 is like single sideband settings. All right, so we can set like our scope level and all that stuff, our AGC, our noise reduction, noise blanker, all that stuff. Second page is all your CW settings, so your key speed, your pitch, your break-in delay, all that stuff. Break-in's currently off because I'm on FM on 2 meters. I did have a 2 meter CW QSO with myself with these two radios. Both of these radios will do 2 meter CW, which is fun. Page 3 is your FM and C4 FM settings. So the 705 does D-Star, the Yaesu does C4 FM. Around here, there are no D-Star repeaters, but there are C4 FM repeaters. So for me, that's a win. All your deeper settings are down here at the bottom. So your main radio settings are here, and you can do it by mode. So I'm currently in FM. So you can set all of those things from in here. Like when you're doing FM, there's where you set your squelch type and your tone and all those kinds of things. Pretty simple. This has automatic repeater shift. So it sets that for you. There's all your APRS settings. This does have legit APRS, not DPRS like the 705. The downside is this does not have an internal GPS receiver, all right, or antenna, which this does. And you'll see I have a GPS lock. Okay, whoops, bumped my BFO. I gotta lock this. I want these both on the same, forget it. No, we're gonna go in there and there we go. I do like having the internal GPS receiver and antenna. I think the reason Yaesu didn't include it and why it's an extra plug-in thing on the side is that this radio serves double duty, because right there on the desk is the Optima amp. We'll talk about that in a minute. And if you're using this as a shack radio, a lot of times you can't get GPS lock in the house. Okay, so like my Anytone over there, the GPS antenna is hanging in the window right there because I can't get GPS lock in the house. And I think that might be why Yaesu chose to do an external GPS antenna on this radio. You can plug it into the side of the radio if you're doing standalone stuff, but you could also run it as an external antenna if you wanted to do it outside a vehicle or outside a house and have better reception. I don't know for a fact, and it is a little inconvenient, but I think you'll have better GPS reception in those situations. Not an excuse, it's more of an explanation of what I think is probably why they went that route. This does not have built-in Wi-Fi. The 705 does. Bluetooth on this is a separate module. It goes in right here. I do not have Bluetooth on this. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't care about Bluetooth on my radios. The only radios I care about Bluetooth on are my HTs. I have a Bluetooth mic with my VRN76, which is cool. However, that mic will now work with this radio also. They just released firmware for that radio, and it will now work with the 705. It works with the ID52 and ID50 and stuff also. But again, very similar radios. Single forward firing speaker here. This one's got lower bottom speakers down here. Both sound great. This is a little, I think, richer, and I think this one is a little crisper. They both sound good. They're just different. And that's typical of Yaesu versus Icom. They just sound different. If you've ever used radios from both of those companies, they just have difference. They just sound different. Whichever one you prefer is up to you. Like I said, I think maybe the Icom's tone is a little better, but the receiver in the Yaesu is better from what I've played with so far. So I can hit this display and we can look at just a single frequency. I don't have an antenna hooked up, so obviously you're not going to see anything on the waterfall at the moment. I can look at both. I can switch between primary and secondary VFOs by pushing this knob. All right, so I can switch back and forth between receivers. Whatever receiver you're on is what the waterfall is going to be showing. All right, we do have our SWR meter and power meters here, and you can touch that. You can change between power and all ALC, and I leave them on SWR all the time. That's just how I do it. So let me talk a little bit about my experience with the 705, and then I'm going to talk about my experience so far with the FTX-1. The 705 is an awesome radio. It sounds great. It's fairly easy to use. It's got a great feature set. It's well thought out. But I use Yaesu radios so much, I'm more comfortable in this guy. I also am looking forward to being able to have 14652 or 14658 on one receiver and whatever HF I'm working on the other receiver, so I can monitor 14652 or 14658 while I'm doing an activation and still be on HF. I can't do that on the 705. That's something I'm really kind of looking forward to with the FTX-1. Now, the thing that really pushes the FTX-1 over the edge for me is the amp. All right, so hooking an amp up to the 705 is not the world's easiest proposition. It does have an amplifier jack on the side, but there are there's some wonkiness with it. With this guy, it's designed around that amp. All right, so turn my lights back on so you guys can see. Obviously, we're going to get a glare on this screen now, but it is very easy to go from, sorry about my fingers, to go from the field setup to the shack setup. But for me, it's not going to be a shack setup. It's going to be field setup and field setup, and that's where the beauty of this is going to come. So I'm going to pull, I've got little rubber, it comes with little rubber caps that can cover the ports in the back. If I'm going out in the field, I'll put those in. Normally, I'm just going to leave those out. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pop my battery off. There's a little clip right there. You loosen the little jack. I needed both hands to do it. It slides off. Battery pack comes off. This battery pack is USB-C chargeable. It does require a C-to-C. It doesn't, they say it's got to be 45 watts, 15 volts PD. It doesn't. There's a short on my channel where I'm charging this on a 30 watt Google Pixel charger. It's not a power delivery brick. It's not on a PD cable. It's just a regular old USB-C to USB-C, and it charged. All right, but it won't charge on a lower output brick, and it won't charge on A to C. Let me turn this down. My other radio is going crazy here. So we now have the battery off. All right, and there's the naked radio. So bring the amp over. The amp on the back has 3 antenna ports. It's got an HF, a 6 meter, and a 2 meter and 70 centimeter port. It has an external tuner port. Now the tuner in this is not super wide. It will tune my 9-to-1 on everything down to 30 meters, and it'll tune the upper portion, the phone portion, to 40 meters. But anything lower than that, this tuner will not tune my random wire on. The FTX-10 will. This won't. So the tuner's not super wide in this, but for field use where I just want to get an antenna good, it'll get the job done. We've got an external speaker port, we've got a ground, we've got a fan, and we've got our typical Yaesu power plug. All right. On the bottom, we've got some feet. I did put the carry handle on the side of this. I took it off my FTX-10. So we have our connections right here. So we've got our audio cable, our tuner, our power, and then our antennas. It's very simple to hook this thing up. It's actually kind of ridiculous. They did a good job thinking this through. Just plug your connections in. It's hard to do when I'm not really looking at what I'm doing. 1, 2, 3. So there's my 3 cables. Hook our antennas up. This is the only fiddly part. You got to get that set in there just right. You clip that guy up, and it's clipped on, and it now is a complete unit. That's cool. Now, this is where this radio is going to really come into its own for me. I plan on using this radio primarily QRP in the field, but if you've been on the radio recently, HF, the band conditions are hot garbage right now. If I was going out to do an activation today, it'd be on the amp. because the amp gives me a whole lot of power when the 705 doesn't. Right? The 705 is 10 watts max. This guy with the amp is 100 watts max. All right. That's kind of where this radio sort of sets itself apart from the 705, is the ability to do this. I didn't get the field tuner for this. I will probably buy one in the future, and that's cool because it clips over the battery. So you put the battery on the radio, and then the tuner goes over the battery, so it's all one unit, which is really neat. But this right here, this is why I bought this radio. The ability to be 2 radios in one. And this would be, if you were a new ham and you wanted one radio that could do everything, this radio would work. It can work in the shack. It can work in the field. It can do HF. It can do UHF. It can do VHF. If you were just going to buy a one and done radio, it's expensive. But this radio, you could get away with it being your only radio. You might want an HT too, but this would do everything you needed it to do. So, like I said, for me, because I'm a Yaesu guy, I prefer how Yaesu does things, and I love their receivers. The 705, as much as I love it, is going to a new home. And that new home is going to be very familiar to a lot of you folks. I am trading it for another radio. And I'm trading it for a radio that I already own, because I'm weird like that. So I was going to sell it. And then a buddy of mine, whose call sign you will recognize in a minute, was going to sell some radios, and one of those was a KX2. Now, this is my KX2. And he was going to sell his KX2, and I said, hey, you want to trade a KX2 for a 705? Because he's a huge 705 fanboy. So we decided we would trade, because I wanted a second KX2. That's my most used field radio, and I kind of want a backup, and he wanted a backup 705, so that worked out. So you will likely see this 705 on Aaron Bowman, W4ARB's channel, because this is going to Aaron, and Aaron's KX2 is coming to me. So thank you, Aaron, for the trade. Hopefully you enjoy the second 705. It's going to give me a little peace of mind having a second KX2, since my KX2 is from the original batch from 2016, and it's getting a little long in the tooth. So as great a radio as the 705 is, for me, I think this is going to suit my needs better. All right. So this guy is going to Aaron. So let's pop this head back off. Let's hook it up to an external battery. Let's measure current draw, and let's see what this actually draws. Now, Yaesu says it draws 900 milliamps. Okay, so let me go ahead and disconnect this from the amp. Now, I'm going to grab a base for this so I can tilt it at the right angle. Because without the battery on it, it doesn't sit at a very convenient, it's flat. So it just sits flat like the 705 does. With the battery on it, you can tilt it back against the battery. So I'm going to throw it on this camera stand. There's a 1/4-20 hole in the bottom. Sorry, it's off camera, but it's going to be easier for me to do in front of me than on the table here. Okay. So I've got that guy on a stand now. I'm going to need a key, because I am going to want to test this key down also. And I'm going to need the mic, which I just threw over here, because I am going to hit the repeater so we can see what the current draw does when it's receiving a signal. So let me grab. So we've got a Bio-NL battery here. We're going to go ahead and hook that guy up. This radio will turn on as soon as I hook the battery up, which is kind of weird. As soon as you feed it power, it turns on. Okay, so we're on 146865, which is one of my local repeaters here. So it's the most active repeater. So I'm going to turn you this way. I'm going to slide this over here so my antenna will reach. I'm going to kill my anytone. All right. Disconnect my antenna from that. I'm going to hook it up to the FTX-1. If I remember correctly, the bottom antenna port, yes, is the UHF VHF one. All right, so I'm on. Oops, I changed That's okay, I don't care. Okay, so I'm on 146865. This is all set up and ready to go on that repeater. So let me grab my amp clamp on my meter. So we're going to be on a Fluke 88. This is an expensive meter, so the measurements should be pretty good. I'm an auto technician by trade, so I have a lot of stuff to do these kind of measurements. Put that guy in millivolts. Zero our amp clamp. So right now we've got, you probably can't see that. Let me bring this up a little bit so you can see. See the number on the meter. There we go. So you've got, the thing you got to keep in mind with this meter is you got to move the decimal point over. Okay, so okay, so 6.0, that's 600 milliamps. Okay, so Yaesu says 900 milliamps. I'm measuring it right now, and it's 600 milliamps. You can see it. So let me hook the mic up. Pardon my arm. K2EJT testing. So 630 milliamps on receive. It was, what was it, about 3 amps when I, K2EJT clear. About 3.5 amps on transmit. Okay. So it's nowhere near what, yes, it's about, now it's showing about 630. You can't see that, there's a glare. About 630 milliamps. See if that gets rid of some of the glare. That helped a little bit, but not much. So again, it's higher than the 705, which we'll test in a second, but you can see that it's nowhere near what Yaesu says it is. Okay, so let's do the same thing with the 705 so you can see the difference. So let me go ahead and kill this radio. I was going to hook a key up to it and just do key down draw, but I don't think it's going to be a whole lot higher than the mic being on it. So let me unhook my antenna, my power cable from this guy. So we'll do the same exact thing with the 705. So I will throw this camera base on the bottom of the 705 so we can get the angle correct and you can see the screen. So the 705 is the same idea. It's got a 1/4 hole in the bottom. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to throw that camera stand on there so you guys can see the radio. That is one thing with the 705. If it's not in the cage, you can't get the viewing angle good unless you have something on the bottom to be able to adjust it. With the cage on it, it just sits against the battery like the FTX-1 does, and you get a good viewing angle. But without the cage on it, it doesn't. Okay, so this actually is the power cable for the 705. So that guy up. I'm going to zero my amp clamp here. Hook my antenna back up. Okay. So turn this bad boy on. Now I'm not going to hook the mic up to this because all I'm really worried about right now is current draw on receive. So we're on the same repeater. We're at 360 milliamps. So it's a little less than half the draw, 370, something like that. So it does draw, the Yaesu was a little over 600 milliamps. This is 360, 370 milliamps. So between 1/2 and 2/3 as much. So it is a little more efficient. Okay. So that is something you need to keep in mind is this guy is more efficient on draw on receive than the Yaesu is. But the Yaesu is not as bad as Yaesu says it was. So that's something to keep in mind. I did have a conversation with Jonathan Kane, Cam4CFT, about that because that was one of his concerns. He did cancel his pre-order for his FTX-1, and that was one. He had several concerns, but that was one of them. But like I said, the receive current draw on this is definitely lower, but the FTX-1 is not as high as Yaesu says it was supposed to be. So let me go ahead and kill that radio, and then we'll sit down and we'll just do some final thoughts here. So let me turn my meter off. my amp clamp out of here, turn that off. All right, so let's finish up here with just some final thoughts about these two radios, and who I think each one might be for. So there's our 705. We throw the battery back on the FTX-1 so I can stand it up in the same fashion. Again, every time you hook it up to power, it turns itself on, which is weird, but I do want to mention the one bug that I've found with this FTX-1. So when the FTX-1 is hooked up to the amp and you're on CW, this only affects CW, at least as far as I've found so far. If you're on CW, yeah, I'm going to leave it up because we're getting a wicked glare on that screen. When you're on CW, on the FTX-1 and you're hooked up to the amp, if you use, so there's a speaker on top of the amp, and there's also the speakers in the front of the FTX-1 field unit. If you are on CW, when you key up, the side tone, if it's coming out of the speaker on the amp, is all clipped and weird and sounds like hot garbage. If you have it coming out of the front firing speakers on the field head, it's perfect. So I'm assuming that's probably a bug in the firmware that they'll have to work out. Either way, it doesn't matter because I prefer the front-facing speakers anyway because, they're facing me, so it makes it easier to hear. You can go into the settings and change that. If I turn this on, I'll show you where that is. So if you have one of these and that's driving you crazy, let me show you how to fix that. So you go into your menu, so long press F. You're going to come over to this screen and you're going to go to Operation Settings. And right here where it says Speaker Select, you can select internal, auto, or external, or both. All right, so you can do, if you do both, it'll come out of both the front speakers and the speaker on the amp. Yeah. If you do internal, it's just the front speakers. And if you do auto, it will work on the front speakers, and then when you plug it into the amp, it switches to the amp. That's what I would do if you're doing single sideband or something, because that way it seamlessly switches, or leave it on both. But for me, for right now, since I'm primarily CW op, I'm going to leave it on internal. And then it's only working off the front-facing speakers. That is the only bug I've found on this radio so far. All right. If I find any others, I will definitely post them. And I did email Yaesu already about that, so they're aware of it. So at the end of the day, who are these radios for? They're for very similar people, right? The 705 is probably a little bit more user-friendly for, I think, especially your newer radio folks. They're going to find this a little bit easier to use. The audio is warmer. This guy, the audio is a little crisper. The receiver is better. And it does give me the option to have dual receive. I think if you're going to be somebody who wants to be able to do a lot of things with one radio, the FTX-1 is a better choice. I think if you're somebody who wants simple and it works and it does, especially if you're going to do digital modes in the field, this guy's probably better because it does have Wi-Fi, does have built-in Bluetooth. These both will hook up over USB. This guy is USB micro. This is USB-C. All right. Very similar radios, both super high quality, both have their strengths, both have their weaknesses. At the end of the day, you choose what works for you. Like I said, for me, after playing with this for a day, even though there are a few things that are going to have to get, I'm going to have to play around with the settings and get everything the way I want it. I think that at the end of the day, this is going to suit the way I operate better than this does. Because if I want a full-featured radio, I'm probably not going way out in the middle of nowhere. If I'm going way out in the middle of nowhere, I'm probably taking a mountain topper or my CFT-1, or if I want an all-mode rig, like I said, KX2 or maybe a TX500, I'm not carrying either one of these. So these guys would get used for the same use case. Going to do a POTA and I'm 100 feet from my truck, that's where these radios shine. But when the bands suck, I want to be able to just plug that amp on and go. Now, could I bring my 891? Sure, but this radio serves dual duty, right? I can leave the amp on it or I can take it off, right? It kills two birds with one stone. Is it perfect? No. Is it a cool concept? Absolutely. Is it for everyone? Absolutely not. Is it for me? Yes. I think this radio has my use case in mind. I don't operate mobile, so I'm not worried about being able to remote. I don't care about separation cables to go from the amp to the head. I don't hardwire radios into my truck. There are a lot of reasons for that. I've been an auto technician for 30 years, and I've seen all sorts of nightmares with that kind of stuff. So I don't hardwire anything aftermarket into my vehicles. So for me, I don't care about the separation cable thing. I don't care about the Bluetooth. I don't care about the GPS. I do care about receiver quality. I do care about being able to listen to two different things at the same time, right? I do really care about the CW. I think this is a better CW radio overall than this will be. And again, that's my own personal preference. That's my take on it. You may be different. Aaron's going to disagree, and that's fine. That's Aaron's choice, right? Aaron loves the 705. I like the 705 too, but for me personally, I think this is a better radio. So hopefully that was helpful. This isn't really a QRP head-to-head because I haven't really used this radio that much yet. I've done probably less than 10 HF contacts on it, and I did the morning net here on it. I made a couple of 2-meter simplex contacts on it, but other than that, I haven't gone out and used this in the field yet. But so far, I'm satisfied. So if you've got any questions about either one of these radios, feel free to leave them in the comments below. If you hate either one of these radios, that's fine. If you love either one of these radios, that's fine. I don't care either way. Like I said, they're different radios for similar use cases, but at the end of the day, one's going to be better than the other for each individual person. You make that decision which radio is better for you. As far as cost is concerned, in the field version, they're a wash. This guy's a little tiny bit cheaper, but not much. I suspect by Black Friday, these guys will be pretty much the same price. But like I said, if you want the flexibility of having the ability to hook up an amp or the tuner or any of that kind of stuff, this guy makes sense. So with that being said, everybody, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And as always, until next time, 7-3. Oh, and sorry, my video quality was a hot mess today. It just I had to throw this one together on the fly because I wanted to get it out there. So thank you for watching, everybody. Take it easy.